Hello, and welcome back to the Prego Diary. So, today I'm going to be telling you about my birth story. As you can see, my son has been born. There he is over there. I had a bunch of plans to do a bunch of different videos right at the end of my third trimester, but he came early. So I'm just gonna get right into it. So since he was breech, we had a planned C-section for June 26th. I kind of had this sinking feeling for some reason that I wasn't going to make it to the 26th. I don't know. Mother's intuition. I went in for my pre-op appointment to talk about everything that was going to happen with the C-section on June 10th or 11th, I think. And then 6 days later, he came. So what had happened was, I had been having prodromal labor for like the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks. So from like 1 to 5 in the morning, I would get timeable, pretty painful contractions, but they weren't anything that was to write home about. And I always knew when they started, this wasn't it. There was only one time that I thought, okay, maybe we should go to the hospital. I think one of the first times it happened, because it felt like really painful menstrual cramps, and they were like 5 to 7 minutes apart, but I told myself that I would wait till the sun rose, and if they continued throughout the day, then I would know, because they always would go away when the morning came. So I was kind of just used to having contractions throughout the night before he came, so it didn't really alarm me when real contractions started. So he was coming the 26th, which was a Wednesday, and a bunch of my family was going to come in that weekend before. So my husband and I, the weekend before that, which was the 15th, we had this special weekend planned. We were going to do a bunch of different things. It was Father's Day that Sunday, and I wanted to do like a special Father's Day for him, and I had a present. And so we were really going to relish that weekend as like our last weekend together. So we watched Get Smart on the 14th. And then the morning of the 15th, nothing changed. I didn't even have prodromal labor the night of the 14th. So I was like, man, we are smooth sailing. Maybe I'll get some sleep before the baby comes. So the morning of the 15th, we have a breakfast. We go to the farmer's market. We spend half of the afternoon at this plant nursery, and I am a plant lover. So I was in heaven. We were there. We were walking around for like 2 hours. There was a goat farm. It was awesome. We installed the car seat, and that took a long time. And then that night, I think around 8 or 8:30, I started having contractions. And it felt like prodromal labor for a while. And I was like, well, they usually last like 3 or 4 hours, so if they don't go away, maybe it's something. But I honestly felt good. I had had a good day. I hadn't had prodromal labor the night before, so I wasn't really expecting anything. Then at around 10 or 10:30, they started getting more intense. And they were 7 to 8 minutes apart, which was a lot of time in between, like way before you need to go in. But they felt a lot different than my prodromal labor contractions. And so I waited just 30 minutes more, and they got like 5 to 7 minutes apart, and they were picking up in intensity. And so I was like, well, I have a C-section. I can't like go into active labor, and I don't want to, because that was the perk of a C-section, was not being in labor. We called labor and delivery, and I explained like, hey, I've got a planned C-section for the 26th, but I've been having contractions for the last 2-3 hours, and now they're 5 to 7 minutes apart, and what do you think I should do? And they were like, well, go ahead and come in, and we'll check you and see what progress you made. So we get there at around midnight. The drive to the car there was kind of rough. Like, I had some pretty painful contractions in the car there. And so my husband was like, man, this is the thing. But I told him before we left, don't even get our bags. I don't know why I said that, but I did. We get to the hospital. They check me in, and they checked my cervix, and it was completely closed, and I was 60% effaced. And so my doctor came in, and this side note, the doctor that was going to deliver him on the 26th, he's a great doctor, wasn't on call when I went in, either of the times when he was actually delivered, but my favorite doctor in the world was, and so it's just meant to be. Anyways, they checked me in, they put me on a monitor, and they saw that I was having regular contractions, and they were timeable, and they had like peaks and valleys, but I just wasn't progressing at all. So the doctor said walk around for about an hour and a half, and if the contractions stop, then we know it's just false labor, and if they continue or they pick up in intensity, then let the nurses know. So I walked the halls for like an hour and a half. I did have to stop once to get through a contraction. The contractions never picked up in intensity, but they never stopped. So I came back, and then he didn't end up checking me until like 2.5 hours after that. Actually, he wasn't even the one who checked me. A nurse had to check me because he was like, I don't know what he was doing. He was maybe obviously delivering another baby or something. At this point, it was like 2:30 or 3 in the morning, and I was still having contractions. They hooked me up to the monitor. The contractions didn't cease at all. And she checked me, and I was still, she said maybe 70% effaced, but my cervix was still closed, so I didn't make any cervical progression. So they said that I had to go home. And the frustrating part was that they said, yeah, if it was false labor, it would last 3 to 4 hours. And I was like, okay, but I've been in labor since like 8 o'clock, and these contractions haven't stopped even after you said, like, if you walk around and it's false labor, it should cease. I just wanted to have my baby. They told me to go home, which took another 2 hours to discharge me, which was annoying. And during those 2 hours, contractions never stopped. They got closer together, and they got more intense. Like, it wasn't anything that I had to breathe through or it took my breath away. They were just like really, really painful menstrual cramps. And I would kind of have to stop what I was doing, and I could still joke and talk through them, but I knew that this wasn't false labor. And so it was very frustrating because I was like, well, I'm just going to come in again and I'm going to get charged for all of this, but whatever. But the nurse came in and she's like, I'm superstitious, and tomorrow night is a full moon. I'm not going to say anything. That's all she said. And so I think that, I mean, she eventually told me afterwards that she thought that I was going to come in the next day, which, whatever. They discharged me. It's 5 a.m. and we get home, and I have a really, really painful contraction from the car to our front door, where I had to stop and I had to sway with my husband for like a minute on the sidewalk. And I told him, I am in labor, but I feel like it's going to take me forever for my cervix to dilate. So I'm going to have to wait until I am really, really, really in pain, probably for them to admit me. We get in, and I'm really hyped up, and I kind of feel sick to my stomach. I'm a little bit dizzy because I was bad and not breathing through contractions. I was just holding my breath and my body was tensing up. So I was getting kind of lightheaded and feeling like I was going to faint. So my husband ran me a bath, and he's like, well, maybe this will stop your contractions. And I was like, I hopped in the bath. It didn't stop the contractions. At this point, though, once the sun started coming up, they got farther apart. They didn't stop, but they got farther apart, and they lessened just a tiny bit in intensity. And so I was like, you know what? Whatever, that's fine. I think I'm going to have the baby probably sometime this week, but maybe at least I'll get a little bit of sleep before then. I hopped in bed at like 5:45, and I slept until 10, and I had contractions all through my sleep, but it was so weird because I was dreaming, and in my dreams I was having contractions. Like, I was talking to somebody in my dream, and I would stop and I would have a contraction, and every once in a while I would wake up because of one, but I was able to sleep even though your body doesn't really get rest because it's pushing a baby outside of your vagina. So I woke up, and I was in a really good mood, and I was able to eat, and I told my husband, I'm going to walk this baby out of me because contractions haven't stopped. The sun is up. I know I'm in labor. I know I'm in super early labor, but I really don't want to get to the point of extremely painful contractions. I labor forever. Then I get a minute. Then I have a C-section because I'm going to be so exhausted. That day, I cleaned the entire house, and I cooked a little bit, I ate, we walked forever outside, and it was a hot day. We did a few more things. I don't really remember that day very much because I was just kind of in the zone. Like, my contractions weren't that big of a deal, but I knew that I was in labor, and I knew that I was gonna have this baby soon. I knew in my heart that I wouldn't go into really contractions that would start really making a difference until that night. We walked, during the walk, every lap we would do, I would have a contraction at the end of the lap. So I don't know how long it was taking us to walk around because I was 9.5 months pregnant. And I could feel like the original early contractions felt like menstrual cramps. So they were very centered in my abdomen. And these started to creep into my back. Like they would start from my back, or they would start from really low, like in my vagina. And I was like, my cervix is opening. Like trying to will it to open, my cervix of steel. My last meal, we went to Wendy's at 8 o'clock. And I got a large fry. That was my last meal for like a long time. As soon as the sun went down and it got dark, my contractions started picking up. So literally I finished my fries like 8:45 or 9. I knew this was the time. The contractions, they started like 8 to 10 minutes apart and were still like those painful menstrual cramps, but it just felt different. Like it felt more involved with the rest of my body. Like it wasn't just in my abdomen anymore. Like it was in my back and it was in my vagina. It was even in my legs. I did that for about 2 hours, and around like 10:30 or 11, I told my husband, go to bed, don't stay up with me. I kind of want to be alone right now and just kind of get in the zone and be by myself, and I'll wake you up when we go to the hospital. Or if we need to go to the hospital. And he was like, are you sure? Are you okay? And I was like, yes, please go to bed. I just want to be by myself. I don't want people in my space. I want to focus on doing this. And I told him, like, if these continue until midnight, then I'll call L&D and we'll go back. And he was like, I'm okay. I started timing them. I got a little contraction timer, and they changed in intensity, and then they changed in time. So instead of like the 7 to 8 minutes apart, they became 10 to 12 minutes apart, but they got a lot more intense. So I think at like 11:30 or midnight, my husband had been asleep. I was watching Great British Bake Off, and they got like 8 to 10 minutes apart, and I was breathing through them, and I was laying on my side because I was trying to do everything that they said should stop false labor. So I was laying on my left side. I was moving around, just different things to see if this was like the real thing, and it definitely was. I was like, okay, I won't call L&D right now because I can still talk through these. I can move during them. I'm gonna keep on going. I'm gonna power through. And then an hour later, the contractions had gotten 5 to 7 minutes apart. Sometimes I'd have one that was like 8 to 9. And these were a lot more intense. When they would come, I would have to focus and really, really just zone out for a second. And I started to sway a little bit, which like in all my podcasts, I was like, when you start to sway, this is when it's getting real. And I was still like, okay, I'm not gonna call L&D yet because I'm gonna be in full blown labor. I'm not gonna go and like they tell me to go back, and I like get readmitted and discharged over and over again. So an hour passes and it's 2 o'clock, and between 1 and 2, things changed a lot. Like they were 4 to 5 minutes apart. They would take my breath away. I would try to stand up. I was swaying. I was all fours. I ended up destroying the house because like I moved our coffee table. I was like, I don't even remember what I was doing, but when we like left, there was like clothes everywhere. I was naked. I was like taking my clothes off. I got in the bath. I tried to like calm myself down, calm my body down. That did not help. And the bath actually made everything worse because I was getting really flushed and really hot with the contraction, so I just kind of felt nauseous after that. And at like 2, I woke up my husband and was like, I need you to call it labor and delivery. I can't talk to them on the phone. I can get like 3 minutes in tops with them, and then I'm gonna have to bow out. So you're gonna have to tell them everything and tell them our situation and ask like, should we come in this time? And so he was like, okay. And at that point I had another contraction, and I was starting to voice through them, like kind of moan and have to sway, and like I didn't want him to touch me. I didn't want anything. And what was happening throughout this time was I was having back labor. So back labor is like you have a contraction, you hit your peak, but then you kind of just stay at that peak until you hit your next contraction. And so there was no relief in between anything. And when the wave would come, it was really, really painful. It would like take my breath away when I would see, like my vision would tunnel, and it was just really insane. Even though I was still in the early stages of labor, because I was having back labor, it made it feel a lot more intense. And like I was feeling nauseous, like I wanted to throw up, and I was like, am I in transition? My husband calls L&D, and the charge nurse that was there the night before, she remembered our information, and she's like, he had her on speaker, and he was on one side of the room, and I was on our island in our kitchen, like swaying back and forth. And while he was telling her my information, I got a contraction, and she could hear me moaning, and she was like, you know what? Come in right now. He and I were both like, this probably isn't the real thing, just because we had been discharged last night, even though I knew it was the real thing. And literally I told him before we left, don't even worry about getting our bags. And he looked at me and was like, Summer, I think I'll get our bag. We don't have to get everything, but I'll get our bag just in case. And I was like, okay, because I didn't want to psych myself out and get prepared to go in and like have my baby and have all of our stuff in the car, and then us get discharged again. Like I would literally go insane. We got there at like 2:30, and the nurse came in and she was like, you were 1.5 centimeters dilated. And I was like, 1.5 centimeters? I have been in labor since Saturday night. At this point, it's Monday morning, 2:00 Monday morning. And I was like, my cervix is made of steel. How does this even happen? She's like, okay, I'm gonna go tell the doctor that you have made some progress, and we'll see what he says. And I was like, see what he says? I'm having a C-section. You know I'm in labor. One frustrating thing, I love this doctor, don't get me wrong, but she went to tell him, and they had hooked me up to the monitors and everything. I was having contractions. She was talking to me, and I would have to be like, I'm sorry, I'm having a contraction, and like have to breathe through it, and I'd have to like take a second even after the contraction was over, because it was back labor, so I'd have to like let my body try and settle back down as much as it could to be able to listen to her. So she goes and gets him, and he says, well, let's not act on anything right now because it's only 1.5 centimeters. Let's see if she progresses. And I was like, sir, it took me like 30 hours to get to 1.5 centimeters. I may progress to 2 centimeters in like another 15 hours, but I'm not gonna do this. Like I am obviously in labor. Nothing has stopped since Saturday night. So please don't. She told me that, and she's like, do you want to walk around? And I was like, no, I don't. I am in a lot of pain. And she's like, okay. And she left for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and they were monitoring me the whole time, and I was having to breathe through them. I kind of moaned through some. My husband was holding my hand, and he was applying pressure. And then she came in, and she's like, we're going to do a hep lock. So they put an IV in, and I don't know what changed their mind. They were monitoring me the whole time, so maybe they were seeing my contractions, maybe they were hearing me, I don't know. She said, we're doing this just in case. We think that probably you're going to be staying here. And I was like, really? So she came back in, and Dr. Brooks came back in, and that is the doctor I love, even though he did some like mildly frustrating things. The reason why they were hesitant was I wasn't 39 weeks yet, which is when you're like full term and when everything's good to like have a child. So when I went into labor, I was 37 weeks and 6 days, and then on Monday I was 38 weeks and 1 day. He told me if I had been 39 weeks when I initially came in, like when I hadn't really progressed the first time, they would have done a C-section then. But because I wasn't, I guess he wanted Harvey to cook a little while longer. He told me, all right, well, you're gonna have a baby. And I remember the charge nurse, we like locked eyes. She was so wonderful, and she had been there when I had initially been admitted, and she looked at me and she's like, are you excited? And I was like, yes. And so he talked me through everything. I'd already had the pre-op appointment, so all my C-section papers were signed, but I didn't really remember anything he was saying because I was having contractions through all of them. And at this point, they were getting like 2 to 3 minutes apart, and they were getting worse. So like he was in there, and then another, like an anesthesiologist came in, and a few other people were like, I guess, prepping me. I would be like, okay, hang on. I would have to breathe through everything. I would hold on to the side of the bed and like smush my face against like the side rails to just like get through the contraction, and then I'd be like, okay. So like, even though I was having back labor and like in between every contraction was still really painful, I was elated because I was like, I'm not gonna be pregnant anymore in just a few hours. I'm freaking out. He did an ultrasound just to confirm Harvey's positioning, because if he for some reason had flipped, they would send me home until I was like 4 or 5 centimeters dilated. We would just have a vaginal birth. So they did the ultrasound, and why I was having back labor was because initially Harvey's butt was on my cervix, so he was frank breech. So he was putting pressure on my cervix before, which was why I was 60% effaced. But sometime, I don't know when he did, he flipped transverse. So like, he was parallel. So his head was like on like the left or right side, and his butt was on one side, and then his, like, nothing was on my cervix. His back was against my back. And so that's why I was having the really painful contractions that made it feel like I was in a lot farther along in labor than I was. So the doctor even told me, you're still in the super, super early stages of labor. I don't know, the way he said it made it seem like you're not even in that much pain. And I wanted to be like, so if I broke all the fingers on your hand and told you, but you still have your hand, so still painful. He confirmed his positioning. Everybody was just like, all right, you're gonna have a baby. And I remember telling him, I am so thankful for modern medicine. Like, I think this is awesome, because I know in the olden days, I don't think I would have been able to birth a transverse baby unless some midwife like hopped on top of me and tried to like twist him around. And we had like a heart-to-heart about it. He's like, I'm so glad you think that, because a lot of moms go into the C-section and they either it's an emergency or they really didn't want it, and they had a different plan, and it makes the recovery worse for them mentally, or they feel like they failed. And I was like, Hunty, no part of me feels like I failed. I have been pregnant with this child for 38 weeks. I have carried him. He is healthy, and I'm about to have a baby. I'm so excited. I have done my work. So during this time, a whole team comes in, and I'm in the labor and delivery room right now, and they're prepping me for the OR. Like, I got a little like buzz cut, I guess, right where they're going to do the incision. So they shaved me, and I'm sure they were telling me important things, but I was having contractions through them, and I was just completely zoned out. Like, at this point, I was like, okay, I know I'm gonna have a baby. I don't need you to tell me the information. I know I'm about to get cut open. I really don't care. Just take me back there. My husband went into a different room to get some scrubs on, and I wasn't even scared. Like, some people hate when their husband has to leave them or their partner has to leave them, but I was like, deuces, I'm about to go get some drugs to stop these contractions. I get back to the OR, and it's a pretty small room, and it's really bright, but everybody in there is so nice. And at this point, it's like 3:40-ish maybe when I was wheeled back, maybe earlier, maybe later, I don't know. They put me up on the table, and I'm having contractions, and I had to walk to the OR, and so I'd have to stop for a contraction because the contractions were really close together at this point, and they were so painful. I don't even necessarily remember walking back there. It was just a blur. We get there, and the anesthesiologist is walking me through my, they were going to do a spinal block, and she was like, I'm going to numb the area first. And so they like set me up on this table, and you have to hunch over, and this big burly guy with like gold chains, he looked like an Italian mobster, which I'm about that aesthetic. He was so sweet, and he like kind of had to hold my shoulders, because when they do the spinal, there's a lot of pressure, and sometimes you'll like kind of jump. But I was in so much pain, I didn't care. And so there was like the tiniest pinch and burn, because they like numb the area first before they do the spinal. So I felt that, then they did the spinal, and it was like pressure. I don't know how to really explain it. I don't know. It's kind of like a reflex, like when your knee gets hit or you hit your funny bone, and like you just kind of jump. And so that's why he was there, like kind of holding me, making sure. After that, they laid me down on the table, and then they tumped me where my head, like I was slightly at an incline. Like my feet were up here and my head was down here to like get the juices flowing throughout my body. The anesthesiologist starts talking me through, your blood pressure can drop when you have the spinal, because like everything in your body goes numb. But the charge nurse had like pumped me with fluids with my IV. My blood pressure never did anything, like it totally stayed stable. I was also like really excited and really positive and making jokes with everybody because I was so excited. I wasn't nervous about a C-section at all. Like I completely trusted my doctor. We had like such a good rapport. So he was really sweet. He told everybody when I came into the room that I was the most positive and skinniest pregnant woman he'd ever had a C-section with, and that this would be the best C-section they would have all year. And I was like, this is so nice. I think he was just being really nice, obviously, but he was so kind. And so they put the blue drape up, and I was like, this is really happening. And it was so surreal. Like, you wait for this moment forever and ever. And honestly, I was just waiting for it, not even to meet my baby as much as I was so excited not to be pregnant anymore and to be able to breathe. And so my husband came in, and he had a little mask on, and I could just see his eyes and his glasses, and I could tell like his hands get really clammy when he's nervous. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and he would like, his hands were so cold, and I was like, it's okay. And it was just, I don't know, it was such a good experience. So my husband was on my left side, and the anesthesiologist was on my right side, and she was talking me through everything in the surgery. My husband and I were talking. The doctor was like, okay, we're gonna start. And I was like, the C-section went great. I did not feel anything. Like I know a lot of people say they feel pressure, and even the anesthesiologist was like, okay, you're gonna feel a lot of pressure right now. It's gonna feel like somebody's standing on your chest. Never happened. The only weird thing during my C-section was I was highly aware that I could not feel my toes or wiggle my toes. And for some reason, like at first that like sent like this jolt of absolute panic through my body. And I told myself like, okay, if I focus on this, then I'm gonna get all wazzed. So I just like breathe deeply through everything, and I tried not to focus on that. I don't know why. I started the C-section because he was in such an awkward position. My C-section scar had to be just a little bit longer. I did not feel anything. Like it was all great. Like maybe the slightest tugging. Like I was very aware that my body was kind of moving a little bit, but I felt no pressure, no pain. At 4:16, the doctor said, we have a baby, but instead of like his butt or back first, he like kicked his way out of the hole in my belly, which was so cool. And the doctors all laughed, and they pulled him out, and my husband was crying. His like trigger word is 4:16 because that was the moment he became a dad. So every time I say that, he's like weepy. They pulled down the drape, and they showed me my baby, and like I was in such shock. I was like, that came out of me? What? I didn't cry at all. I was just like, dude, I'm not pregnant. Did the C-section thing. We'll get to the bonding thing later. I don't know. Because they showed him to me, and I was just like, I don't know who you are. My baby, but I don't know you yet. He wasn't crying at first. He was just like looking around. But he got really pissed off when they started like taking the amniotic fluid out of him. And that's when he started crying really, really loud. I had initially wanted to do skin to skin, and I wanted to do delayed cord clamping, but my placenta was thick, so they had to like cut the cord and then send my placenta off to pathology, which, is that what that's called? So that I could get to happen. And honestly, after the C-section, I did not want to do skin to skin. Like, I saw him, he was covered in like blood and guts and nasty things, and I was like, yeah, wash that baby off, and then we can talk about holding him. That's just how I was. I'm not ashamed. I know some people love their like gooey baby like all over them and all over their skin, but I was like, no, because I don't know the next time I'm going to be able to take a shower. So you and me will both be happier when you're clean. So they put him in the warmer, they wrapped him up, and they put him on my chest, laid like flat on your back, and your arms are out. They didn't strap me down or anything. So they like put him right here, but I couldn't see his face because of the way that he was positioned. And so like after like a minute, I told my husband, can you hold him so that I can look at him? Because I just want to see what he looks like. And so he held him, and I was like, that's my baby. And Austin was like all teary-eyed. I was not crying at this point. Like, I actually didn't cry until not that night, but the next night when I was holding him, and then it finally hit me like, this is my baby. I wasn't really that concerned about it. Like, I wasn't like, oh no, I'm never gonna bond with him, because I knew bonding was gonna come over time. I did not know who this human was. I know some people feel like this really strong attachment to their baby as soon as they're born. I did not. I was just like, you are cute and I made you. What? And you also came out of me. But I was in shock, I guess, too. So, sewed me up. They like lifted me off of the table onto a bed and they wheeled me into labor and delivery. TBH, at this point, I had been basically up since Saturday night, and it was Monday morning, and then I think they wheeled me back into our room around 5, and so I was absolutely not mentally there. Like, I was so tired. I was so happy, and the good thing about going into labor, I guess, was all of those hormones were flowing. You know, all of those labor hormones and whatever they are were there. So, like, after I had him, I felt I was in nirvana. Like, I was on top of the world, had the baby high, like, felt so good, so, like, I was, like, in charge. I was like, girl, I just had a major abdominal surgery, birthed a baby through my belly, went into labor. Are you awake? He has FOMO, so he hears me talking about him, and he's like, excuse me. Hi, little buddy. Okay. And those few hours in the labor and delivery and then them taking us into our room, I'm going to be honest, I don't remember a lot of, because I was so tired, but also like so high. Everything with the C-section went great. Recovery was awesome. Honestly, like, they put a catheter in, and I love that because, like, I could drink and drink and drink and drink, and then it was taking care of it for me. The pain medicine wasn't that bad. I told the anesthesiologist that I have really strong reactions to pain medicine, like I throw up. I told her that, and I was like really adamant about getting that into everybody's minds. Like, give me a nausea patch, give me everything, because I don't want to be throwing up during the C-section and throwing up after the C-section, because that would just be awful. And so she gave me some nausea meds, and she just assured me, like, whatever kind of thing they were giving me, it was going to be okay. I was also GBS positive, is that what it's called? And so I had to have antibiotics, which you have to have anyways during a C-section, but I'm allergic to penicillin, so they had to, like, do some special antibiotic. But everything was seamless. Recovery was great. Like, I mean, they have you walking around pretty quickly. I was able to take a shower on my own. I was sore for like the first 3 or 4 days, pretty sore when I stood up, like I felt it. But other than that, like, I was able to walk around. My husband did have to help a lot, like picking up the baby out of the little crib he was in our room, and then nursing. But everything was great. I loved my C-section experience. I had the luxury of knowing that I was going to have a C-section from very early on. He was breached the entire pregnancy. He never flipped, and I just always had this feeling that I was going to have a C-section. Like, they kept on telling me, you know, it's okay, he could flip, and I was just like, I don't think he is, and I'm okay with him not. I was totally okay with the C-section. I loved the doctors, and the whole experience was great. Like, I just went into it with a very positive attitude and already accepted, like, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to make the best out of it. And I guess maybe I got the best of both worlds, because now I know what labor feels like, and I got the hormones, and then I had the C-section, but I loved it, and my baby was delivered healthy with it, and recovery wasn't that bad. So that is my birth story. Yeah, he was planned C-section for June 26th. He was due June 30th, and I went into labor June 15th, and then he was born June 17th at 4:16 a.m. 6.1 pounds. So he's sleeping right now, or I'd get him out, but there he is. So yeah, I absolutely had 100% amazing experience. I know a lot of people and a lot of moms have trepidation about it and are totally terrified of C-sections, but I am here to tell you that mine was like the best birth experience for me and my baby, and the safest way that he would come into the world. And I felt like a freaking superhero afterwards, because I had a baby out of my belly, and that is awesome. That is where he grew, and that is where he came out of. And it was an amazing, empowering experience that I love sharing with anybody that will listen. So if you're a mom and you're pregnant and you think you may be having to have a C-section, or you're worried about it, reach out to me, because I'm so happy to talk about my C-section experience. I'm sure I've forgotten details that if you ask me questions about, I'd be able to remember, but there's just so much to talk about, and I was definitely high during the entire process, because yeah, that is my birth story with Mr. Harvey Jude. Excellent experience. I definitely will still be uploading videos about motherhood on here. I'm not going to rebrand to like Mom Diaries, because Prego Diaries is, oh man. So the next things will be, we had a 5-day hospital stay because he had jaundice. So we'll be talking about that, talking about nursing. He's a month old now, so everything in there, like newborn things I wish I'd known. There's a lot I want to share with you all, the 5 people that like watch me. Any questions you have about what you'd like me to share, motherhood so far, anything like that postpartum, drop it in the comments below, and I will get back to you guys with a video hopefully soon. Motherhood's insane, and that's why my mom here is like living right now. So follow me on Instagram for a lot of pictures of my precious baby, and my daily Prego Diary stories about all the insanity of motherhood. It's at the Prego Diaries, and then subscribe. Bye.